black waitress serves Millionaire's deaf grandmother. Her secret left everyone speechless. You can't be serious. Manager Victoria Pierce's sharp voice echoed through Silverstone, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. A waitress like you serving the Hartwell family's VIP table. Kesha Johnson, 24, held her tray steady as she faced Victoria's contemptuous gaze. At her feet, shards of the Chinese porcelain plate that had slipped from the manager's hands formed a mosaic of calculated humiliation. The noise had caused all the kitchen staff to stop and watch the spectacle. "Clean up this mess and get back to the kitchen where you belong," Victoria continued, adjusting her channel blazer as she shot a meaningful glance at the other white waiters. "Table 12 is no place for people like you." Kesha never imagined that her 2 years washing dishes and serving leftovers in that temple of New York's elite would culminate in this moment. But something in the way Victoria said, "People like you," awakened an inner strength she had learned to control since childhood. "With all due respect, Victoria," Kesha replied with a calmness that surprised even herself, "I was specifically assigned to this table by Mr. Hartwell. Perhaps you should talk to him if you have a problem with that decision." A tense silence filled the kitchen. Over the past few months, Kesha had noticed small signs. The way Victoria deliberately assigned her the worst shifts. How she accidentally forgot to include her in the larger tips. How she always found fault with her work. But tonight would be different. James Hartwell III had called personally that morning, specifically requesting that the waitress who talks with her hands serve his table. Victoria nearly choked on her coffee when she received the message, clearly not understanding what it meant. The truth was that Kesha had a secret that neither her co-workers nor Victoria could imagine. Something about her past that would completely change the way everyone saw her in that place. "Fine," Victoria spat out the words. "But when you ruin the night of the most important family in this restaurant, don't say I didn't warn you." And if a single detail goes wrong, she left the threat hanging in the air, smiling with the cruelty of someone who knew exactly where she was going with this. Kesha nodded silently, but her eyes revealed a determination that made some of the more observant employees realize that this young woman carried something special. A serenity that only exists in those who have weathered much worse storms and lived to tell the tale. As she made her way to the main hall, where the Hartwell family was waiting, Kesha maintained the upright posture of someone who holds a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. Victoria had no idea that she was about to witness something that would forever change the dynamics of that restaurant. If this story of prejudice and overcoming adversity is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple gesture of communication would become the catalyst for a revolution that no one would ever forget. The main hall of Silverstone seemed even more intimidating under the golden lights of the evening. Kesha walked between the Italian marble tables, each step echoing in the reverent silence that always accompanied the arrival of VIP customers. At table 12 by the windows overlooking Central Park, the Hartwell family waited. James Hartwell III at 35 was exactly what one would expect of an heir to a financial empire. A tailored suit, a watch that cost more than Kesha's annual salary, and the relaxed posture of someone who never had to prove anything to anyone. At his side, an impeccable blonde woman typed frantically on her phone, clearly his wife. But it was the third person at the table who immediately caught Kesha's attention. Mrs. Dorothy Hartwell, 78, watched the restaurant's activity with curious, intelligent eyes. Her silver hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, and she wore a navy blue dress that radiated understated class. There was something about her posture, a slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes moved constantly, searching for visual cues, that Kesha recognized instantly. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell." Kesha greeted him in her best professional voice. "My name is Kesha and I'll have the pleasure of serving you tonight." James smiled politely, but his wife didn't even look up from her phone. "We want the wine list right away," she muttered, still typing. "And bring the appetizers quickly. We have an appointment at 10:00. Kesha nodded, but her eyes remained on Mrs. Dorothy, who seemed from the conversation happening around her. It was a painfully familiar scene, the deaf person being treated like furniture while others made decisions for her. "And for you, ma'am?" Kesha asked, positioning herself directly in the elderly woman's field of vision. Mrs. Dorothy looked confusedly at James, who sighed impatiently. "She always has Chardonnay. No need to ask." It was then that Kesha made a decision that would change everything. She positioned herself directly in front of Mrs. Dorothy, and with fluid and precise movements, signed, "Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you. What would you like to drink tonight?" The effect was like lightning striking the table. Mrs. Dorothy's eyes widened, her hands trembled slightly, and a radiant smile lit up her face. James dropped his napkin, staring open-mouthed at Kesha while his wife finally put down the phone. You talk with your hands." Mrs. Dorothy signed back, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's been so long since anyone has spoken directly to me." "Yes, ma'am," Kesha replied in signs. "And I would love to know what you would prefer to drink. We have an exceptional German Rilling that pairs perfectly with our salmon." The sign language conversation continued for a few minutes with Mrs. Dorothy excitedly asking about menu options, making jokes about the food, and for the first time in a long time, being the center of attention in a positive way. James watched in fascination, clearly moved to see his grandmother so engaged. "How did you learn that?" he asked Kesha, still processing what he was witnessing. Kesha smiled softly. "My younger sister was born deaf, sir. Sign language was my second language before I even learned to read." What she didn't mention was the rest of the story. How at 16, she had become responsible for her sister when their parents died in a car accident. How she worked 3 jobs to pay for Amara's specialized school. How every penny she earned at Silverstone still went towards speech therapy sessions and special educational materials. How her own college education had been put on hold indefinitely to ensure Amara had every opportunity. Victoria watched from the kitchen doorway, her face contorted into an expression that mixed surprise with something much darker. Pure anger. Seeing Kesha receive attention and praise from the restaurant's most important family clearly struck a very specific nerve. For the next hour, Kesha waited tables with a dedication that went beyond the professional. She translated jokes between Mrs. Dorothy, and James explained ingredients in visual detail. And for the first time in years, the elderly woman was truly included in the family conversation. "Grandma is happier than I've seen her in months," James commented as Kesha served the main course. "Where do you normally work? Because I want to make sure you always serve our table." "Actually, sir, I normally work in the kitchen. This is my first night waiting tables," Kesha replied honestly. James's face immediately changed. "You work in the kitchen with that talent. Who made that decision?" Before Kesha could answer, Victoria appeared beside the table like a storm dressed in black. "Mr. Hartwell, I hope everything is perfect. Kesha is still in training, so if there are any problems—" "Actually," James interrupted, his voice taking on a tone that Kesha recognized as that of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "I'm impressed. Kesha has provided the best service we've ever had here. My grandmother is communicating directly with someone for the first time in months." Victoria forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How wonderful. I'm sure it was interesting." The way she said interesting made Kesha realize that her evening was far from over. Victoria wasn't the type of person to forget when her employees stepped out of line, especially when it resulted in recognition she felt was undeserved. As the Hartwell family finished dessert, Victoria pulled Kesha aside to a discreet corner. "My office midnight. Don't be late." Kesha nodded calmly. But something in Victoria's eyes sparked a familiar sense of alertness. It was the same expression she had seen on the face of the social worker who had tried to separate her and Amara years ago. The same look she recognized in people who saw her strength as a threat to be eliminated. But Victoria made a crucial mistake that night. She assumed Kesha was just another desperate employee, willing to accept any humiliation to keep her job. What she didn't know was that when you raise a person to be strong from the age of 16, when you teach someone to fight for every opportunity and protect those they love at any cost, you're not dealing with an ordinary victim. Kesha had spent 8 years navigating systems that weren't made for people like her. Welfare, hospitals, special schools, employment agencies. She knew how to spot predators from a mile away. She knew when she was being tested, and most importantly, she knew exactly how people like Victoria thought. As she cleared the table after the Hartwells left, Kesha maintained the same calm that had intrigued her colleagues earlier. Because what Victoria couldn't imagine was that this problematic waitress held not only the secret of sign language, but also 8 years of experience fighting much more powerful systems and winning. Every insult she was about to receive, every humiliation Victoria planned would be carefully memorized and stored away. Because Kesha had learned a valuable lesson while caring for Amara. Sometimes you have to let people completely underestimate you before showing them what you're really capable of. At midnight sharp, Victoria Pierce's office seemed even more claustrophobic under the cold neon lights. Kesha entered to find the manager sitting behind her metal desk, surrounded by stacks of employee evaluations and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Sit down," Victoria ordered without looking up from her papers. "Let's talk about your performance today." Kesha remained standing, immediately recognizing the intimidation tactic. She had seen the same playbook dozens of times in social service offices, police stations, and school principal offices when fighting for Amara's rights. "Listen carefully, Kesha." Victoria finally looked up, her eyes cold as ice. "I've been running this restaurant for 12 years. I know my place, and more importantly, I know everyone else's place here. People like you," she paused deliberately, "need to understand that there are limits." "Limits, ma'am?" Kesha asked in a controlled voice. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I'm talking about." Victoria stood up slowly, circling the table. "Yesterday you were just another dishwasher. Today, by some stroke of luck, you managed to impress an important customer, but that doesn't change who you really are." What Victoria didn't know was that every word was being carefully memorized. Kesha had learned over years of navigating hostile bureaucracies that people like Victoria always revealed their true motivations when they felt in complete control. "Starting tomorrow," Victoria continued, "you will return to the kitchen permanently, and to ensure there are no future misunderstandings about your place here, you will work only the morning shift from 5 to 2 in the afternoon every day, including weekends." It was a calculated punishment. Victoria knew that this schedule would make it impossible for Kesha to have any other job, effectively imprisoning her at Silverstone with the lowest possible salary. "I understand," Kesha replied simply. The calmness of her response clearly frustrated Victoria, who had expected tears, please, or at least some sign of despair. "You understand, that's it. You're not going to beg to keep the privilege of waiting tables." "No, ma'am. I appreciate the opportunity to work here." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Good. Then there will be no problems. And Kesha, if I find out you're trying to circumvent my decisions, talking directly to customers, or doing anything outside your job scope, you'll be out on the street that same day. There are 10 people waiting for your spot." Kesha nodded and headed for the door. But Victoria wasn't finished. "Oh, and one more thing. Your special little sister Amara, right? Specialized schools are expensive. It would be a shame if something affected your ability to pay for them." The threat hung in the air like poison. Kesha stopped with her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn around. "I understand perfectly, ma'am. Good evening." When she left the office, Kesha kept the same serene expression until she reached the employee locker room. Alone, she finally allowed anger to flash in her eyes. But it wasn't the impulsive anger of someone who had lost control. It was the calculated fury of someone who had just witnessed something she couldn't let slide. She took out her phone and opened a voice recording app. "Report 1, she murmured softly. "Wednesday, 11:47 p.m. Victoria Pierce. Direct threats related to racial discrimination and blackmail involving my sister's disability." What Victoria was completely unaware of was Kesha's history. 8 years of fighting bureaucratic systems would teach anyone to document absolutely everything. Every suspicious conversation, every discriminatory comment, every unevenly applied policy, everything was carefully recorded and archived. The next morning, as she arrived at 5:00 a.m. for her new punitive schedule, Kesha noticed a familiar car parked in front of the restaurant. James Hartwell's black BMW. He intercepted her at the employee entrance, still wearing the suit from the day before. "Kesha, how nice to see you. Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Mr. Hartwell, although I need to start work in a few minutes." James frowned. "Work? You're not waiting tables today?" "No, sir. I've been permanently reassigned to the kitchen." "Why? Your performance yesterday was exceptional. My grandmother can't stop talking about you." Kesha hesitated. She knew that one wrong word could result in immediate dismissal if Victoria found out. But something in James' sincere eyes made her make a decision. "Mr. Hartwell, may I be blunt with you, please? I would like to continue waiting on your table and your grandmother's. Yesterday was special for me too, but certain people in this establishment have specific opinions about where I should be here." James studied her face carefully. "Are we talking about discrimination?" "We're talking about internal politics that I need to respect in order to keep my job, sir." The diplomatic answer told James everything he needed to know. "I see. Kesha, I'd like to make you an offer. Would you be interested in working directly for my family? We have regular events where we need someone who can communicate with my grandmother. The pay would be substantially better than your current position." Kesha's heart raced. It was exactly the kind of opportunity Victoria, was trying to prevent her from having. That would be amazing, sir. But I would need to give 2 weeks' notice here. Of course. And Kesha, if anyone tries to sabotage your departure or create problems during those 2 weeks, I want you to call me immediately. He handed her a card, my personal number. As James left, Kesha looked at the card in her hands and smiled for the first time in months. Victoria had made a fatal mistake. She assumed Kesha was just another desperate employee with no connections or resources. What the racist manager couldn't have imagined was that this simple dishwasher had spent 8 years learning. That the system only changed when you forced it to change. And now, with a powerful ally and years of experience documenting injustices, Kesha finally had all the tools she needed to make Victoria pay for every humiliation. That afternoon, while washing dishes during her punitive shift, Kesha mentally organized her strategy. Every recorded conversation, every witness to racist comments, every policy applied in a discriminatory manner, everything would be used at the right moment. Victoria glanced occasionally through the kitchen window, clearly satisfied to see Kesha in her place. What she couldn't see was the determined gleam in the eyes of a woman who had learned to turn every injustice into fuel for something much greater. Because when you teach someone to fight against unjust systems from the age of 16, when you force a person to become a strategist to protect those they love, you're not creating a victim, you're forging an adversary who knows exactly how to take down people who abuse power. And Victoria was about to discover that she had completely underestimated the wrong woman. Kesha's second week of notice was coming to an end when James Hartwell showed up at Silverstone for an unexpected meeting with the owner. Victoria nervously adjusted her blazer. Unscheduled visits from investors were never a good sign. Mr. Hartwell, she greeted him with her most professional smile. What a wonderful surprise. How can I help you today? Actually, Victoria, I came to talk to you specifically about Kesha Johnson. James kept his tone neutral, but something in his eyes made the manager's stomach clench. Ah yes, Kesha, a suitable employee. Although she has had some discipline issues recently. Victoria tried to control the situation before it got out of hand. Discipline issues. James raised an eyebrow. Can you give me specific examples? Well, she broke protocols. She acted outside her position, you understand. People like her sometimes need to be reminded about hierarchies and boundaries. The phrase people like her hung in the air like an involuntary confession. James made a careful mental note. Interesting. And what exactly was the protocol she broke? Victoria realized she was treading on dangerous ground, but her arrogance prevented her from backing down. She communicated directly with your grandmother without permission. Employees at her level should not interact with VIP clients without proper supervision. I see. So, you punished an employee for providing excellent customer service. James's voice remained calm, but I see. I reassigned her to a position more suited to her qualifications. It was at that moment that Kesha appeared carrying a tray from the kitchen. Victoria immediately called her over. Kesha, come here please. Kesha approached calmly, but James noticed something different in her eyes. A serene confidence that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. Mr. Hartwell would like to talk to you about your transition to the new position, Victoria said, clearly expecting Kesha to confirm the official version of events. Of course, Kesha replied, taking her phone out of her pocket. Actually, Mr. Hartwell, I have carefully documented our entire conversation about this transition. It might be useful in clearing up some misunderstandings. Victoria's face instantly palled. Documented. What do you mean by that? Kesha tapped the screen of her phone. Victoria's voice echoed clearly through the speaker. People like you need to understand that there are limits. Your special little sister Amara, isn't she? It would be a shame if something affected your ability to pay for them. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stared at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake. There's more, Kesha continued, her voice remaining perfectly calm. 3 weeks of similar comments, discriminatory schedules applied only to black employees, and multiple witnesses to your questionable management practices. James studied Victoria, who is now breathing heavily. Victoria, do you have anything to say about these accusations? She's taking everything out of context. She's a disgruntled employee trying to frame me. Victoria stammered, her professional composure completely shattered. Context. Kesha raised an eyebrow. Let's hear the full context. Then she played another recording. Victoria's voice filled the space again. I've been running this restaurant for 12 years. I know my place, and more importantly, I know everyone else's place here. People like you need to understand that there are limits. James turned to Victoria with an expression she had never seen before, the controlled fury of someone accustomed to destroying careers with a single decision. Victoria, as the principal investor in this establishment, I am officially terminating our partnership. You have until the end of the day to clear out your office. You can't do that. Victoria exploded, her mask of professionalism finally slipping. Because of this go on, James challenged her. Finish that sentence in front of witnesses. Victoria realized the trap and closed her mouth, but it was too late. Every word, every glance, every reaction was being observed by employees who had suffered years of her discriminatory behavior. Keisha calmly put away her phone. Mr. Hartwell, I believe our conversation about the new position can continue in a more professional setting. James nodded, watching Victoria crumble before his eyes. Certainly, Victoria. My attorney will be in touch regarding the legal aspects of this situation. I recommend you consult yours. As they walked out, leaving Victoria trembling in her own restaurant, James turned to Keisha. How long have you been planning this? Or 8 years? Keisha replied simply. Ever since I learned that documenting injustices is the only way to ensure they have consequences. Victoria watched through the window as James and Keisha talked outside. For the first time in her career, she had completely underestimated someone. Not just an employee, but a strategist who turned every humiliation into evidence, every abuse into ammunition for her own downfall. At that moment, Victoria finally understood that she had wasted years trying to break someone who was unbreakable from the start. And now, surrounded by the satisfied glances of employees she had mistreated, she realized that her reputation, her job, and her career had been methodically destroyed by the very person she despised the most. Victoria's phone rang. It was the restaurant owner who had just received a very interesting call from James Hartwell about documented discriminatory practices and possible lawsuits. Meanwhile, outside, Keisha finally allowed herself to smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of long overdue justice. Because when you teach someone to be strong from the age of 16, when you force a person to become a strategist in order to survive, you're not creating a victim. You are forging someone capable of turning every injustice into fuel for their own rise. Victoria had underestimated a woman who carried 8 years of experience fighting unjust systems and winning. And now, as she watched her career crumble in real time, she finally understood that she had chosen the wrong adversary. The real question now was not whether Victoria would survive this exposure professionally. It was whether she would ever be able to look in the mirror without remembering the moment when a simple waitress proved that intelligence and preparation always beat arrogance and prejudice. 6 months later, the Hartwell Hotel's event hall glowed under golden lights as it hosted the first annual Inclusion Gala. Keisha Johnson, now Director of Community Relations for the Hartwell family, adjusted the microphone on the main stage, preparing to present the sign language training program she had developed. Ladies and gentlemen, she signed simultaneously as she spoke. Today we celebrate not only inclusion, but proof that when we give people real opportunities, they always exceed our expectations. In the front row, Dorothy Hartwell applauded enthusiastically. Beside her, James smiled proudly, knowing that this gala was a direct result of Keisha's vision. The program had already trained more than 200 employees at hotels in the chain, transforming the experience of DAFE guests across the country. My sister Amara, Keisha continued, always told me that our difference is not our limitation, it is our superpower. And she was right. Amara, now a graphic design student at a prestigious university thanks to the scholarship James had created specifically for her, waved from the audience with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, just 15 blocks away, Victoria Pierce watched the live stream on her cracked cell phone in her one-bedroom apartment. After losing her job at Silverstone, she discovered that the recording of her discriminatory statements had spread across social media. No restaurant or hospitality company in Manhattan wanted to associate its name with the racial scandal she had created. Her own fellow managers, who had once respected her authority, now avoided her at industry events. The last week had been particularly brutal. Her application for a position in New Jersey was rejected after a simple Google search revealed dozens of articles about the racist manager of Silverstone. Back at the gala, a former Silverstone employee took the stage. Keisha taught me that dignity is not something other people can give us or take away. He signed and spoke. It's something we carry within us regardless of how we are treated. The irony did not go unnoticed by the audience. Here was a woman who had been systematically humiliated and diminished, now leading a cultural change that would affect thousands of lives. James stood up. initiating a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Victoria hung up her phone in anger, but the reality was inescapable. Kesha had not only weathered the storm, she had become the storm. While Victoria languished in irrelevance and regret, her former employee was building a legacy that the hotel industry itself celebrated. True revenge, Kesha concluded her speech, is not to destroy those who have hurt us. It is to build something so beautiful and powerful that it makes it impossible to ignore our humanity. It is to transform our pain into the fuel of our greatness. The final applause echoed through the hall, but also across the screens of cell phones where thousands watched live. Victoria had tried to break Kesha through prejudice and arrogance, but ended up creating the exact opposite, a leader who would forever change the way the industry treats marginalized people. 2 years later, when Victoria finally landed a job as a hostess at a small cafe in Queens, she occasionally saw news stories about the awards Kesha was receiving for innovation in corporate inclusion. The program had expanded to more than 50 companies, and Kesha was regularly invited to speak at universities about leadership and social justice. The lesson was crystal clear. When you try to destroy someone out of pure prejudice, you're not only revealing your own smallness, you're providing that person with all the motivation they need to become everything you could ever be. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more narratives that prove that our greatest victory is not defeating our enemies, but building a world where they become irrelevant in the face of the greatness we choose to hate.